Ready or not? And now, like when we were kids, we used to play like hide and seek, and ready or not, here I come. Well, those will be the words of Jesus at the end of the time. Ready or not, he will come. And so last week I introduced this theme, and I focused on the last four things. The last four things being death, judgment, heaven, and hell. I think it's important for us to remember those words. Memento mori. It's Latin for you will die. I know that that's not kind of one of those things we really like to talk about too often, but let's face it, looking around, pretty much in about 100 years from now, we'll all be dead. That's a fact. There's only those two things that are for certain, death and taxes. Last week we had taxes. This week we're going to continue talking about death. Because death is one of those things we need to prepare for. You know, it was funny, I was thinking of the scene from The Odd Couple, way back when, those of us who are a little bit older might remember it, when Oscar was playing pool against some guy that was like a shark. He was really good. And while Oscar's taking his shot, the opponent is talking to Felix. But the opponent is one of these people that has all the bad habits. He smokes, he drinks, he's way overweight. And so Felix is talking to him about these things. It's like, he goes, oh, I had a cousin. He used to smoke a lot and drink, and he was way overweight, and he died when he was 46. And the guy goes, I'm only 45. So the guy gets all nervous, and he throws his cigarettes away, and he puts the drink aside, and he goes over, and he goes to take the shot, and he's shaking so much that he misses it, and Oscar ends up winning. And Oscar says to Felix, he goes, I don't know what happened to him. He seemed to lose his cool. He goes, I don't know either. I was talking about my cousin, the one that got hit by the bus. You don't know when. But it's interesting in how sometimes we need that wake-up call. We need that wake-up call to remind ourselves that, maybe we need to change our lives a little bit. Maybe things ought to be different in the way we do things and how we approach things in life. And from the beginnings of the church, one of the things that was always at the heart of the proclamation of the gospel was this reminder that Jesus died and rose, and that there will be life beyond the grave, and how we live our life between now and then does have impact on where we will end up for all eternity. And we need to be preparing, we need to be ready for memento mori. We will have to face death and judgment. And so last week, as I introduced it, Jesus was pointing out, if you remember, this whole thing with the Roman coin and everything was pointing out the hypocrisy of the people of his time who were trying to trap him, but they used the image, they carried the image of the Roman emperor who considered himself a god. So they were violating the first commandment. You shall have no other gods but me. So he catches them in their own hypocrisy, but begging for us, what are the things about which sometimes we can be a little hypocritical? We talk a good game, we say how much we love the Lord, we say how much we want to be close to God, and yet sometimes our lives are not bearing witness to that truth. And so we get to today's gospel. Now, mind you, we are well into Matthew's gospel. We are at what I call the other end of Matthew's gospel, where we started, you remember way back, it was still winter, it's starting to get chilly again. Back when we first returned to ordinary time, we did the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount that goes for 3 chapters in Matthew's Gospel, chapters 5, 6, and 7. And in chapters 5, 6, and 7, Jesus lays out what I consider to be one of the most important speeches or sermons that have ever been given. And if you listen to it very carefully, it's filled with a lot of things that are now being bookended at this end of the Gospel. Jesus has entered into Jerusalem. His going to the cross is imminent. It's going to be happening in a few short chapters. We're in chapter 22, and in chapter 22, Jesus has been doing what we've been hearing of late, and we will hear a little bit more of it next week. Unfortunately, we're going to be skipping over chapter 24 to get to chapter 25 in 2 weeks. Chapter 24 is where Jesus talks about all the coming things that are going to happen. I wish we could hear them all. So please go read those sections. In Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, there's that one section where Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor. You've heard that it was said, You shall not get angry at your neighbor. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you, love your enemies. Now, these many months later, maybe we forgot that part of the gospel. Because when we hear this gospel today, we're always like, oh yes, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's so great, Jesus. Thank you for making it so easy. But is it really easy? Is it really, truly easy today? Because I think that there's been a real breakdown in communication. What does the word love mean? Because we all throw the word around. I heard a fascinating study. A guy gave a sermon one time that I was listening, and he talked about the movement in music. Music is a powerful force in our universe. It really is. When you think about how much we learn from music, I always say, like, even the last song you'll hear will be still going on in your head as you leave here, but you'll forget most of what I said in the homily. You'll be singing the song in the car ride home because music is kind of like that. It sticks with us. But look at the love songs that we've heard going back to the 20s and 30s. Not that any of us here can really remember them fresh. But they were true love songs back then when they talked about this love that a man and woman might have in their lives. They talked about how true love is, and then it started to change a little bit. And by the 50s, you started to see some of the rock that came in. So you got your Elvis Presley love songs, which were a little bit different than the ones from the 20s and 30s. But forget about it when you get into the 70s. Because that's when you start getting like, Jim Morrison and Led Zeppelin and, like things like Whole Lotta Love and all this. And what happens is, he says, if you see, it goes from being that bond of people to a physical act. I was kind of sitting there that day when the judgment came down that, gay people can be married. And I have nothing against a person. I never will. But to say love is love confuses something, because I have a lot of very good friends, priest friends, whom I love dearly, that I do not want to love as a husband and wife. I'm not going to use the words that my mind wants to use right now because we're in mixed company here. But to reduce it to that act is kind of going against love. I used to do this with 8th graders. Ask an 8th grader what the word love means. And inevitably, you're going to get that one young man that'll go, well, it's like that, when she's like, oh, like your mother? No, not like that. I said, but you love your mother. So she's a pretty young girl, but that's not love. And yet our culture is cultivating that kind of an attitude towards love. But that's not love. I want to be clear about that, my dear brothers and sisters. Love has been reduced to good feeling. And love is not always a good feeling. And if you want proof, parents, you love your children. When they get sick and you have to stay up till 3 in the morning, is that feeling good? But yet you wouldn't trade it for anything because of the love that's present for your child, the love that's present for a spouse. And so where I think this breakdown comes from today, Pope John Paul II, God bless him, there's a reason why he's a St. John Paul II. When he first was elected Pope, one of the things that he said he did a couple of things. Immediately he started doing a presentation every Wednesday, which was from a book that he had been working on, that's now commonly known to many people as Theology of the Body, but actually the title in Italian was Male and Female. He created them. I did a lot of study on this when I did my dissertation. From that, he did the Synod on the Family, what I would consider an actual synod, not this stuff that's going on right now, where he called together bishops from around the world to discuss family. And from that, we got a document called Familiaris Consortio. And in this document, he spells out some of the light and dark, and this is back in the early 80s, the light and dark spots that are happening in the family today, and how the family has truly come under attack back in the 80s. How marriage and the family, the hallmark of existence in human beings, has been torn apart. And you fast forward now to today, you see a real difference. I mean, it was said, one of the Fatima visionaries said that the final battle will be over marriage and the family between God and Satan. And there is a battle going on. Families have been beat up. I don't know how else to say it. I watch sometimes husbands and wives who are at each other's throats, who are snapping at each other over the silliest little things. I tell every couple when I do their wedding, you two have to pray with each other every single day. You need to be praying with each other every single day. And I do put a condition on it. When you say the prayer, you keep this closed, because this is what makes all the mistakes. This is where the problems come a lot of times, is out of the mouth. So you pray in silence, gazing into each other's eyes. Husbands and wives, we need to strengthen you. We need to build you up, because the family rises and falls on husbands and wives. The family rises and falls. And St. John Paul II said, the family ought to become a school of love. Now think about that for a second. This union of persons that is cultivated between a husband and wife, between parents and children, between parents and grandparents and all the other members of the family, building up in love, true love, so that when we go forth, we are actually loving, not lusting, not desiring, but loving. And love means, and Jesus makes it clear, there is no greater love than to lay down your life for the other. And he proves it on the cross. There's no greater love. Is that what you define as love? Is that your hallmark of love? Because at the moment of judgment, that's what we're going to be judged on. Jesus just made it clear. You want to know what the greatest commandment is? Love the Lord your God with your whole heart, mind, and soul. And yet how often we half-heartedly love God. We say we love him, but, oh, I don't have time to stop for a quick prayer. Oh, you know what? Mass isn't all that important. I really don't have to go to church this weekend. I got all these sports commitments and all these other things. No, love the Lord your God means total self, total gift of self to God. But the second part of it I've always found very interesting, because I've heard some very, very bad talks given on, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. They always go back to like the Whitney Houston. It's like, there's no greater love than to love oneself. No, that's not what Jesus Christ just said. Thank you, Whitney, but he said something much deeper. It's a linguistic problem in my estimation, because other languages have what they call a reflexive verb, one that comes back to you. So make the circular argument. You shall love God. Well, who loved you first? God did. God so loves you, he sent his son. God initiated the love relationship. He created you. God loved you so much, he gave you existence. He gave you a family. He gifts you with so many blessings. It starts in God. You return that love to God. But then when you get to your neighbor, say it this way, and love your neighbor as you yourself are loved by God. Love the other as you are loved by God. And I don't think we're too good at that anymore. I don't think we have that virtue anymore, that sense of, if you will, self-sacrifice, that ability to give of ourselves. To be ready for death, to be ready for judgment, that's going to be what he asks you about. Did you love your enemies? You know, we see all these battles going on now in our politics and in our society. And not one person do I ever hear say, but I love that person. I care about that person. I'm not going to get angry at that person. I'm going to try to help that person. I'm going to try to share myself with that person. I'm going to share my faith with that person. But I'm not going to condemn that person. I'm not going to beat down that person. That's not love. We will be asked about that. How did you treat the other? Did you see the other as an object of desire, as a problem to be solved? Do you see the other as a person to be loved? And if so, did you actually love them? Don't confuse love and lust any longer, my dear brothers and sisters. We've been too long told that. Don't allow those to be mixed up in your mind and in the way you treat one another. A good practice for us, when you go forth from here and you get into your car and you go to get out of the parking lot and someone cuts you off, Because you know anger is one of the deadly sins. Can you love that person? You know, it's funny, the school of love, the family should be the school of love, and yet I thought it was so beautiful when Father Mike in the Catechism in a Year got to the fourth commandment, and he said, but the problem that we have is we're all faulted beings. We're all corrupted beings. We all are tainted by original sin. We all have that fundamental flaw. So even within the family, there's that fundamental flaw. We have an imperfect love in our school of love. And there's so many families out there that struggle today because they're not addressing that. They're thinking that it's just pure harmony. When we all just get along, when there's no issues, when everything is going right, then we're all wonderfully in love with each other, everything is okay. But I've been in many, many homes, and I've seen many, many families, and it's anything but the Brady Bunch. There's no way that it's going to be like that, my dear brothers and sisters. It's struggling through the difficult moments. It's embracing the hard times. It's holding on to the other, embracing the other, being there for the other, even when they've hurt you, even when they've done terrible things to you, to be there for them and to let them know you are never alone, and I will love you no matter what. Doesn't mean that I'll give you whatever you want. It doesn't mean that you have a license to go forth and continue hurting. We'll work on that together. But I love you too much to let you do evil. I love you too much to go out and hurt others. And so I will continue to love you into heaven. I will love you into heaven. Walk away with that one phrase today, because that's the goal. I got to get you there. And as your pastor, I'm going to tell you clearly right now, the moment you die, you will be judged. The moment you die, as I said last week, you will not be able to call your lawyer. You will not get someone that's going to stand there and make every excuse under the sun why you did what you did. You won't get that opportunity, because the Lord will look at you and say, I loved you so much. Why did you so often fail to love as I loved you? Take up your cross and love one another. Pick up that cross and unite yourself to the other. And when you see someone that you consider an enemy or a problem, stop dead in your tracks and say, is what I'm feeling right now a love or not? There's no in between when it comes to love. Either you loved or you didn't. Ready or not, I pray that when the moment comes, you will all be ready to say, I loved the way I was loved by Jesus. God bless you.